Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Jai Shri Shri Gaura Nitai, Jai Shri Shri Radha Govardhana, Krishna Balaram Jai Giri Govardhana ki jai, Vrinda Devi Tulsi Devi Maharani ki jai, O glory to the simple devotees, O glory to the simple devotees, O glory to the simple devotees, O glory to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga, Gaur Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol. Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome to this morning's Srimad Bhagavatam class. We are going to be reading from the third canto, chapter 15. This chapter is named Descriptions of the Kingdom of God. We're on text number 13. Let's grab my glasses. Narayanam namaskrityam narocharam narottam Devim sarasvatim vyasam tato jayam udiraya nastapadeshu padreshu nityam bhagavate sevaya Namaishtoki bhakti bhavati naishtoki Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Text 13. Ta ekada Bhagavato Vakunta Shamalatmanaha Jaju Vakunta Nilayam Savalokam Namaskritam Ta Excuse me, I can't see. Tai kada Bhagavato Vakunta Shamalat Anaha Jaju Vakunta Nilayam Savalokam Namaskritam Tai kada Bhagavato Vakunta Shamalat Manaha Jaju Vakunta Nilayam Savaloka Namaskritam. Tade Kada Bhagavato. Else? Anybody else? No? Okay. Word for word. Te Ve Ekada once upon a time. Bhagavata of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Vakuntasya of Lord Vishnu. Amalaat Manaha, being freed from all material contamination. Jaju entered Vaikuntha Nilayam, the abode named Vaikuntha, Sarvaloka, by the residence of all the material planets. Namaskritam, worshipped. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Translation. After thus, this is Lord Brahma speaking here to the demigods. They're in a bit of bother at the moment. After thus travelling all over the universes, they all also entered into the spiritual sky, for they were freed from all material contamination. In the spiritual sky there are spiritual planets known as Vaikunthas, which are the residences of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and His pure devotees, and are worshipped by the residents of all the material planets. Repeatedly, after thus travelling all over the universes, they also entered into the spiritual sky, for they were freed from all material contamination. In the spiritual sky, there are spiritual planets known as Vaikunthas, which are the residents of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and His pure devotees, and are worshipped by the residents of all the material planets. Purport. The material world is full of cares and anxieties. In any one of the planets, beginning from the highest down to the lowest patala, every living creature must be full of cares and anxieties, because in the material planets one cannot live eternally. The living entities, however, are actually eternal. They want an eternal home, an eternal residence, but because of accepting a temporal abode in the material world, they are naturally full of anxiety. In the spiritual sky, the planets are all called Vaikuntha, because the residents of these planets are free from all anxieties. For them, there is no question of birth, death, old age, and diseases, and therefore they are not anxious. On the other hand, the residents of the material planets are always afraid of birth, death, disease, and old age, and therefore they are all full of anxieties. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Om Agyanati Mirandasya Gyanam Gyanam Salakaya Sakshus Unmilitam Jena Tasmae Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swamupam Kadamayam Darati Svaparantikam Pangalagayate Sailam Mukkam Acharaya Shrutim Tatkripatam Bande Krishna Chaitanyam Ishvaram Anshakapatru Vishna Kripa Sindhu Vijaya Patitanam Pavinipu Vaishnavyo Namo Namaha. So this is a continuation. Lord Brahma is addressing the demigods here. They're all a bit in anxiety. As we've been reading, there's been an auspicious pregnancy of Diti, Kashyapa and Diti, and these two demoniac entities have entered the womb of Diti, and now there's all sorts of strange omens and darkness in the universe. The demigods, very fitting to this purport, are anxious and in anxiety. So they're approaching their Supreme Lord, Lord Brahma, the topmost entity in the universe, and with a smile on his face is going to address their anxieties. It's very interesting, and it's important that we read the Bhagavatam in its entirety, because otherwise, like I said, poor old Kashyapa and Diti have been copying a bit for their inauspicious activities. But if you read through, there's, like Ishvaka Prabhu was saying a few days ago, the Bhagavatam is multi-layered. There's a lot going on. So as we read through this chapter, we'll find out that now Lord Brahma is beginning a description of his the oldest, the second oldest, you could say, living entities in the universe, 4 Kumaras. They appeared even before Narada, as far as I remember. Yeah, they're very ancient little creatures. They have bodies of five-year-old little boys. They took on the eternal youthful bodies, and they're great sages, very learned and very pure and powerful, and so much so they're able to travel outside the universe into the spiritual sky, which is not very easily done. NASA's been trying to go to the moon for the last 50, 60 years and not having much luck. We don't even know if they even went to the moon, but they're not having much luck with the little tin cans on their rocket fuel. So the very proud material scientists and philosophers, I think, they've achieved so much. But here we hear these great ancient sages without any spaceship of any kind could travel off, and the distances are beyond our imaginations, but still very quickly they can be in these extraordinary places. And we'll see later on there's some difficulties in this chapter, and there's some curses of also great souls in the spiritual sky, and hence we have this pastime going on here. So you could make a case that Diti and Kashyapa were also victims of the Lord's pastimes, you could say, in a polite way. They were impelled because there's higher things going on here. For these living entities that we're going to hear about, the curse that come in the material world, they're not under karmic directions. In other words, they haven't performed acts in this world to force them to take birth here. They're actually, this whole thing is ordained by the Supreme Lord. So we can also understand this pregnancy is also ordained by the Supreme Lord. It's not some... and we'll find out later on how exalted these Kashyapa, Diti, and especially a sister of Diti is called Aditi. She's the mother of the demigods, and later on also she feels anxiety and stress, like Prabhupada says here he paraphrases the Bhagavad Gita, Abrahma Bhuvana Loka, from the highest planets, Krishna says, to the lowest, all places of miseries. And some of us don't want to admit that, but that's a fact. And this is explained in the purport. So later on we'll find out that Aditi is so exalted that she was in anxiety because the demigods had offended their spiritual master, and hence the demoniac entities headed by Bali Maharaj had overtaken the high planets. This is something you don't also hear in high school and other places. There is universal battles going on, evil versus good. This has been going on eternally in this material realm. So Aditi, the sister Aditi, also married to the same husband, Kashyapa. She's in a lot of anxiety. So again, the anxiety is there because her son has been driven away, Indra, the king of heaven, and so many of her other sons, and they're suffering. Some have been injured in battles and so forth. So she approaches her husband, and he preaches to her, and he gives her the basic philosophy, not the body, don't worry too much. Pretty much a mini Bhagavad Gita class, but she didn't buy into it. She wanted more. So then he told her she should worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So here we can see they're actually transcendental devotees. They're not just ordinary living entities, as we may think sometimes. And then Kashyapa instructs on this performance of special type of bhakti. It's a vrata. It's called the Paya. I can't remember now. It's in the 8th canto. Paya vrata. Yeah, Poya or Paya, one of the two. Vrata. And it's a 12-day process of intense austerity to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And she wanted that to be able to help her sons, and she performed this extremely well, and perfectly well, so much so that she pleased the Lord so much that the Supreme Personality of Godhead appeared before her. So I'm bringing all this up to glorify these personalities because they've been getting a bit of a rough go lately. So we can see that, and he told her, he said, I'm very pleased with your austerity. I'm also very pleased with the ongoing performance of austerities by your husband Kashyapa Muni, and he agreed to appear their son. So these personalities end up having that Supreme Lord as their son. So this means they're not very ordinary like that. So, but still, nevertheless, in the higher planets, we can see there's a lot of ongoing problems. We think it's just in our little world here. But Prabhupada makes it very clear in the purport what the problem is. You've got an eternal soul So the soul by its nature is eternal, full of bliss and full of knowledge. And then we're in this temporary, miserable, ignorant place. And we can see the two don't quite match up too well. You've got bliss and misery, you've got eternality and temporariness, and you've got ignorance and bliss. So that's why living entities in this world that are embodied are in a lot of difficulty and not very happy, because it's not our natural home. Srila Prabhupada, pretty much that's the whole purport here, bringing this point home. And the Bhagavatam goes to great length at different stages to contrast the miseries of this world and the glories of the spiritual realm. So we don't get, because we can still be attached to this miserable place somehow or other due to deep conditioning, and we can still be making plans. And when I say we, I'm talking about the broader general living entities. I mean, the devotees have other plans, but still we're still slightly to one degree or another entangled and caught up due to past association. And this is why we have this wonderful process here in the Bhagavatam. We can hear this as a positive alternative. There is another place, another world that exists. That's Vaikuntha versus Kunta. Kunta means anxiety, Vaikuntha means no anxiety. And it's hard to believe there's such a place, but the Bhagavatam is telling us this, and not only is it telling us this, it's telling us how to discover and go to this place. You know, it's like you can almost describe the Bhagavatam as a transcendental GPS for going home. You know, where everybody likes to find their way around these days. So the Bhagavatam is a transcendental guide for spiritual navigation, and we can navigate ourselves back and to the spiritual realm, to our eternal home. And the way there's many ways that they describe it. I mean, we have to study the consciousness of these Vaikuntha Vasis, which we're going to hear some very beautiful descriptions coming up. It's a wonderful section coming up in the third canto where Lord Brahma describes the Vaikuntha spiritual world and its residents. It's quite extraordinary. It's not like here. Like for starters, you're eternal, and the body that you reside in is not a temporary vehicle. It's actually you. The spirit and the body are one, right? And the lifespan is eternal. The bliss, the pleasure you derive from being fully absorbed in continuous, unbroken devotional service is ever growing and ever increasing. There's no point where I've done this, I've done that, I've been there. What now? You know, the material world is always full of dead ends. You know, what now? You know, you've tried eating this, you've gone here, you've done this. You've tried so many different relationships. Even if you have success in the material world, it's taken away by death. So there's always a cutting point. And Prabhupada makes it very clearly, it says that the influence of time is conspicuous by its absence in the spiritual world. So there's time there, time's eternal, but the influences, the birth, the death, like it's been mentioned here, the old age, the disease, the anxieties, the problems that are brought on primarily by time. Time takes away everything, decays things. You know? The spiritual world, time is a servant. It enhances the eternal activities of the Lord and His devotees. It's quite, and Krishna I always remember this pastime of Krishna in Dwarka. There was this Brahman that was losing all of his children. They were dying at birth or disappearing. And this is quite unusual in a cultured, civilized, spiritual society where everything runs quite perfectly, even materially speaking. And so it was unusual. And Arjuna found out about it, and he said, "Don't worry, I will guard your coming children. You're in the womb there, and if anything happens to them, I will enter into fire." He was prepared to give up his life if he wasn't able to protect. This is a true Kshatriya, true leader. These don't exist these days. Our modern leaders are called TV Kshatriyas. I think Redundant calls them. If there's a war or a battle, they go 50 miles underground in the bunker and they watch it on the television. They go, get them. They send all the young men out. Themselves, they hide. And they usually, as example speaking, they usually have a 50-year supply of whiskey and prostitutes. That's our modern leaders. So these leaders, these real leaders of the Bhagavatam of bygone ages, they were prepared to put their life on the line. They would go to the front of the battle. So Arjuna was prepared to give up his life to protect this one child that was about to be born. And again, that child disappeared. Arjuna was about to give up his life. Krishna came to at that very moment and said, no, don't do that. I know, I'm paraphrasing here. And I know where they are, come with me. So Krishna went onto his chariot with Arjuna and they drove past the moon. So they've already beaten us. Kept going and right through the end of the universe. They went to the coverings of the universe. You believe that? The shell. And then they penetrated the outer coverings and went right through. What extraordinary horses and chariots. Totally spiritual and transcendental, not of this world. And they travelled right through and they went to the abode of Mahavishnu. Mahavishnu is the Lord that's lying there in blissful splendor. What's the word? Slumber. And without any effort whatsoever, he's breathing out universes. They're coming out continuously in and out of his. And he actually, after all this, he'd taken all those children. He'd taken all those children. And his reason for doing this, because he wanted to have darshan of Krishna Arjuna, he wanted to see him. And Prabhupada comments in the Caritamrita that Krishna is so beautiful. Krishna is so beautiful that even Mahavishnu wants to take his darshan. The next one. So Mahavishnu is Krishna also. In an expansion of Krishna, he also wants to see Krishna. It's so beautiful. Krishna is all attractive. So anyway, the point being is the time is not affected. And if you think of this pastime, if you're a bit introspective and you contemplate, I like to sort of look into these things a bit more in my mind. And then they brought these children back to these householders, and that gentleman, Brahmin, was standing there still waiting. So if you think of terms of time, to go all the way out of the universe, to spend time with Mahavishnu. Now what's Mahavishnu doing while he's talking to you? He's breathing, right? And what's happening when he's breathing? These universes are coming out. So how much time is going on? But still, Krishna is able to, and Arjuna able to go back, and that Brahman is still there waiting. So that's what Prabhupada means by the influence of time is conspicuous by its absence in the spiritual realm. There's no effect. Time was there because it took some time to get there. They spent some time together and they came back. But no influence. There was nothing. Krishna was totally transcendental to time. It's quite extraordinary if you think about it. Anyway, so this material world, the living entities, Prabhupada says, we are eternal and we're stuck in this temporary world which causes us a lot of anxiety. A lot of anxiety because, like I say, you can make so many plans and you'll hit dead ends over and over again. So the Vaikuntha realm is very beautifully described for those who've read the Bhagavatam. If you want to hear more about this realm, there's wonderful descriptions in there by Srila Sanatana Goswami. And it's explained that there's so much variety there that the living entities that were originally at some point in the material world, the Lord that they worship, because Krishna, it's explained, appears in every species of life. This has been mentioned in a few classes. Prabhupada says that there's a planet for each one of those incarnations in the spiritual realm. So, which means there's practically unlimited planets in the spiritual world, where the devotee in so many different ways can have a relationship and a service with the Lord, which is very, very unique. And it's explained in Bhagavatam that the type of worship and the person, the entity, the spiritual incarnation that the living entity worships, so that we know we have Kurma and we have Matsya and Varaha. We already know the Lord appears in different forms, but there's unlimited forms. So, and throughout time, and we can't conceive of how long time has been going for because time is eternal. So since time immemorial, living entities have been worshipping the Lord in so many different forms, and it's explained that form they worship and are dear to them. When they go to Vaikuntha, they take on that form. So if you worship the Lord as a butterfly, you have the opportunity to have a spiritual form as a butterfly and satisfy the Lord in that form. And the living entities do that to create unlimited variety for the pleasure of the Lord. They actually like to do that. So it's not all the same program for all. There's so much unlimited variety. And the residents are totally absorbed in blissful devotional service. And the key here is what Srila Rupa Goswami has taught us, is pure bhakti is unbroken, unmotivated, right? And it says, if you think about that, there's not a moment, not a split second where you're not thinking of Krishna and absorbing devotional service. Not a second. And it's unmotivated by any material desires, karmic desires, jnanic desires. It's completely pure, unalloyed. Prabhupada uses the term unalloyed devotional service. In Gopi Prabhupada says this word unalloyed is a metallurgic term that Srila Prabhupada coined. Unalloyed means not mixed with anything, completely pure. So this is the type of bhakti that we've been taught, and the benefit of this type of bhakti enables you to enter the spiritual realm, because you can't function in the spiritual world unless you absorb in this type of bhakti, because you won't be able to function there. And you can't relate to God unless you're on the platform of pure devotional service, because he relates to the living entities on this same platform himself, unalloyed, pure devotion. His commitment to living entities is also pure and unbroken and eternal. It's only really us that we've temporarily sort of turned our back on the Lord. But Krishna is very kind. He gives us our GPS, our guide back home, and if we disregard his kind guidance he gives us in these scriptures, and then we'll be very unfortunate. Krishna says in the Gita, Yas Shastra Vidimurtsrija Vatate Karata that if you disregard the scriptural injunction and act according to your own whim, basically do your own thing, do what I want. My youngest teenage son, when he was in his young teens, that was his mantra, do what I want. I want you to go and put the garbage out. No, I do what I want. So this is the problem with the living entities. We're trying to do what we want, but we've ended up in a pickle. So Krishna says, if you disregard my scriptures, my shastra, yashastra vidimuchi, vatata kamakara, act according to your whim or to lust, then you'll neither attain perfection, nasukam, nor happiness, nor param gatim, nor the supreme destination. So by disregarding the kind help the Lord has given us through his scriptures and his guides, the spiritual teachers, the acharyas, the mahatmas that come and present this scripture to us, and if we say, no, we know better, we want to do our own thing, then Krishna says, unfortunately, you won't make it back home, you won't become perfect, and you won't be happy. And that's sad, because we're all trying to become happy. So if you want to become happy, that is a secret, to take and become absorbed in this transcendental literature and follow the process given by the Lord specifically for this age, which is the chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, and you'll be guided back home, back to Godhead. And the beauty about it, you can experience what the Vaikunthavas is experiencing without waiting to get there, because if you can achieve pure bhakti in this life, you'll be free of anxiety, you'll be blissful, and you'll feel eternal, because you'll be connected with the eternal function of the soul, which is eternal devotional service, unbroken devotional service. So this is what we're aspiring for. This is what's being taught in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And does it mean we've got to be pure before we start? No, you'll see many examples of totally materially motivated devotees in the Bhagavatam. And the great example we always dwell on is Dhruva Maharaj. He was an angry little boy. He'd been offended by his father, been thrown off the lap of his father by his envious stepmother, and he was so angry he wanted to, and his desire was to have a greater kingdom than his grandfather, which was very, very opulent. I think it's Swayambhava Manu, one of the Manma avatars, one of the great personalities of this universe, very opulent, wealthy personalities beyond our imagination. So he wanted to be greater than them. So he approached God in that consciousness. That's called totally motivated. But still, because the process of bhakti is so powerful, he became totally purified and actually attained Krishna and became a pure devotee. And we see that, what I mentioned earlier, Diti, that was very anxious to protect her children. It was also motivated devotional service. She performed bhakti so she could help her children. That's So some people come and pray to the deities for their children's education. That's okay. That's recommended. Karma, sakarma, moksha karma. Krishna says, whatever way, come to me any way you like. Come full of material desires, no desires, even if you want to be liberated from this world. Whatever motivates you, come to me and I'll help you. And Krishna will fulfill those desires and more. Ultimately, He'll give us pure bhakti, and thus we can attain this Vaikuntha, which has been described here. In our particular sampradaya, the followers of Lord Caitanya, we aspire for the highest planet in the spiritual realm called Goloka, Krishna Loka, where Krishna personally resides with his eternal devotees, and there's a special type of bhakti performed there, which is different than the bhakti, you could say, in the overall Vaikuntha plan. So Vaikuntha planet, the bhakti is Ashvarya, it's full of opulence, or reference. Everybody knows that Krishna, that Narayan, Vishnu, this is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There's no thinking that he's other than that. So and they're always in that consciousness. Prabhupada mentions in the Madhya Lila that actually there's no Yoga Maya in Vaikuntha. Interesting. Yoga Maya is the spiritual Maya, which prevails in the topmost planets, Goloka Vrindavan, where the residents there, they're so absorbed in love for Krishna, they don't think of Krishna as God whatsoever. They think of Krishna as my son, my friend, my lover. So they have these direct relationships with Krishna, and they're fully absorbed in that relationships, and there's no question of it. So there's a different types of bhakti. So the bhakti that's been given to us by Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu is in the top most developed stages called Raganuga Bhakti. We follow in the footsteps of those exalted residents of Vrindavan, but we achieve that through the process of Vaidhi Bhakti, following the rules and regulations. We don't jump ahead and artificially think that we're a gopi or a cowherd boy and whatever. It doesn't work that way. It's not a cheap thing. It's something that has to be achieved by great purity and great blessings from higher entities, the spiritual souls and the great devotees. We have to receive their blessings, and ultimately, as explained, you have to receive the invitation of the residents of Vrindavan to enter Vrindavan. You can't force your way in. You can't say, I've chanted so many rounds, I've done so much service, let me in. It doesn't work that way. You can't. You've got to earn the merciful glance of the residents of Vrindavan. And we are so fortunate because we are the servants of the most merciful resident of Vrindavan, Srila Prabhupada. We are following in his footsteps. We're in a sense Raganugas. I remember Bhakti Shri Swami explained it that way. It says, by following Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu, who's Krishna or Radharani, Krishna in the mood or form of Radharani, we're also following him. So that's also a form of Raganuga. And Bhakti Shri Swami explained, this is a course I did about 20 odd years in Mayapur, and it's quite extraordinary, but beyond my pay grade, but still I remember some of the key points. And he made the point that we don't have to endeavour for any separate, Raganuga direct approach to the Vrindavan mood. He says we just simply have to serve Caitanya Mahaprabhu and Srila Prabhupada, and that everything will be taken care of. And he said that service, because the rasa in Caitanya Mahaprabhu's pastime is predominantly service. We just serve, isn't it? Lord Caitanya didn't engage in other rasas with his devotees. There was a loving, friendly service attitude at best, but it was service. So Bhakti Shri Swami was saying through the service of Caitanya Mahaprabhu, Srila Prabhupada, his mission, we will attain Raganuga Bhakti without any separate endeavour, because we are directly serving these great entities from Goloka Vrindavan. So we're very, very fortunate, very blessed. And now we're going to be hearing more descriptions of this transcendental realm. If you want to read more in the Bhagavatam, there's very lengthy commentaries on Vaikuntha, and ultimately much more information on Goloka, because that's where also leads to the Bhagavatam is like the essence of the Bhagavatam, which was spoken by Maharaj Parikshit to his mother, Uttara, after the Bhagavatam was spoken. The Bhagavatam was spoken over 7 days and 7 nights. At the very end of the Bhagavatam, when Sukadeva Goswami left, there was Maharaj Parikshit was still sitting there. He was waiting for the snake bird to come. We know that he's been cursed to be bitten by a snake, and he was waiting there. Jaimini, who was a god brother of Sukadeva, was also sitting there. It's explained that he was purposely sat there in that position right at the front of the assembly. And then when Sukadeva left, Mother Uttara, the mother of Maharaj Parikshit, she wanted to come. She wasn't sitting in the assembly. She didn't hear the Bhagavatam, but she wanted to see her son and bid farewell. Her son was about to leave this world. But above that, she wanted to hear. She asked him, what did Sukadeva say? She wanted to know what Sukadeva Goswami said. Now Sukadeva had just spoken for 7 days and 7 nights. And Maharaj Parikshit was about to leave his body, so he couldn't quite repeat the whole Bhagavatam. So he spoke the Bhagavatamrita, which is the essence. And there's beautiful verses spoken. And Jaimini was sitting there, he also recorded that. And later on he repeated that to Maharaj Parikshit's son, Jambijai. And it was later revealed to Srila Sanatana Goswami. So it's a very important book. It's the first book written by the Goswamis, by Srila Sanatana Goswami. And Prabhupada writes in the Chaitanya Caritamrita, if you want to know about Krishna, if you want to know about devotees, and if you want to know about bhakti, you must read this book. So anyway, I'm glorifying the Bhagavatamrita because it does give you, it enhances the Bhagavatam experience, and it also gives you a very in-depth look into the spiritual realm and how to get there in the process. And it's very, very wonderful through the chanting of the holy name. Like that. Okay, we can have, there's a few minutes left. I can talk forever, but we have to allow a bit of time for you to hear from you. If you have any questions or objections or reflections or anything you want, comments, please go ahead. Otherwise I'm going to keep talking. Yes? You've got a microphone for you? So we can hear, so the whole world can hear what you're saying. Otherwise you can have mine.
Thank you for your wonderful class, and correct me if I misunderstood. I heard that you said we can pursue happiness as long as we follow scripture, but also some part of Bhagavatam it is said that if we pursue happiness, the more we pursue happiness, the more we get frustrated. So what's the balance? How much we can pursue happiness, and also how much should we renounce?
Okay, I don't think I quite said we're pursuing happiness, but this is a byproduct of Krishna consciousness. When you become absorbed in Krishna's happiness, that's how you become happy. So it's not that we are pursuing happiness. We ultimately, there's all sorts of carrots dangled in the scriptures to entice us to do certain things, you know. But ultimately, and the Karma Kanda, which is the bulk of the Vedas, is designed for that, to gradually elevate you by offering you some higher results and some more material happiness. But ultimately, the pure Bhakta, he's only interested in the happiness of Krishna, and that's what's going on in the spiritual world. Everyone's absorbed in the pleasure of the Lord. There's no conflict. Material world is continuous conflict because everybody is in it for themselves, and we see that individually and also nationally. You see countries versus countries and wars and conflicts simply because people wanted to derive some happiness for themselves at the cost of others. So this is material consciousness. So I was contrasting the difference between the two. So we don't have to renounce spiritual happiness. That's a byproduct of spiritual practice, which is it's a transcendental satisfaction and happiness that comes naturally from the soul, be connected when the soul is connected through bhakti, through service to the Lord. There's no separate endeavour. It's not that in Krishna consciousness we got to try and get bliss and chant those, and chew our beads and try and squeeze some bliss. It's not like that. We're offering the Maha Mantra for the pleasure of the Lord. we're performing all activities for the pleasure of the Lord, and naturally you're satisfied and happy. You don't have to endeavour. So it's not a material happiness. Material happiness doesn't exist. You name me one person in the material world that's become happy. Give me one example. Anybody? One. There's 8 billion people. Give me one. Anybody? No? Can't think of a Hollywood movie star? A rock and roll star? Nobody? Actually, you can't think of them. Most of them are in divorce courts or in rehab. So no, there's no matter of so-called material happiness doesn't exist. It's just a bit of a temporary relief. But as Prabhupada says in his purport, it's a lot of anxiety, angst, because we're not in our normal home. So happiness comes from being properly situated, and this is the process. And we find ourselves, the more we apply it to the process of Krishna consciousness, all those anxieties don't exist anymore. It's birth, death, old age and disease. Devotees are not worried by these things whatsoever. Srila Jiva Goswami describes the death of a Vaishnava as walking along and dropping your chata. Anyone? You're in a chata. Chata is like a little covering. So devotees walking along and drops a chata. That's what death is like for a devotee. It's not a big deal, because he's absorbing devotional service, which is unbroken, and unbroken means continuous. So even death doesn't break that devotional service. The devotee continues serving right through death. Interesting, eh? Non-devotee, it's a different story. Death is a lot of anxiety, again, because you're absorbing the body. You're not the body, so you're absorbing the body and the things of this body. So at the time of death, the anxiety increases because these things are going to get taken away from you. And you're so attached because you've got no spiritual identity. You haven't cultivated your spiritual identity. So Srila Prabhupada's blessed us with this knowledge where you can cultivate and reawaken our eternal Krishna consciousness. So even death, you'll happily die. Devotees, I've seen devotees that die, they usually have a smile on their face, mouth open where the soul's left. It's not a big problem. It's not. But for here, Prabhupada says here, on the other hand, the residents of the material planets are always afraid of birth, death, disease, and old age, and therefore they are full of anxieties. That's what Prabhupada says. Interesting. Huh? Anybody else? Anybody here in anxiety? Any problems? I mean, that's all you hear in the material. Everyone's anxiety about finding a house to live, the cost of living. In the spiritual world, they don't have that, There's no cost of living. You get free rent up there. So if you want to live somewhere where the landlords aren't going to kick you out, go to the spiritual world. You don't even need a credit card up there. It's interesting. It's explained in Bhagavatam. The residents of Vaikuntha are so powerful. They have total freedom. Sometimes we think if we become a Hare Krishna, it's all rules and regulations, we're going to lose our freedom. It's the total opposite. In the material world, you're completely confined by these bodies, these minds, birth, death, old age. You're forced. It's like a prison. Spiritual world, you can do what you want. And in the Bhagavatam, Gopa Kumara, he bumps into the residents. He's in the spiritual sky traveling to Vaikuntha, and he bumps into residents from Vaikuntha traveling to the material world. And he has a discussion with them. And what are they doing there? They have love and compassion for us conditioned souls, and they actually go to wherever souls are chanting the holy name, and they help us. And we saw there's a vivid example in the 6th canto of Ajamil. He accidentally chanted it, and those entities from Vaikuntha were there to help him, assist him. So they're there always. They're our guardian angels, and they can do whatever they want. They can expand. As explained, they fly in Vaikuntha aeroplanes, and when they arrive back in Vaikuntha, you don't have airports and airplane hangars, they call them, right, where you park. There's none of that. You don't park your plane in a shed in the spiritual world. It enters back into your body. That's the spiritual realm. So it's a bit different than here. You don't need spare parts and mechanics. Because mechanical stuff is quite miserable. So there's no misery there. All right, it's coming up to breakfast. There's 5 minutes to go. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. And all glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Srimad Bhagavatam. Gaur Premanandi Hari.